If you're watching this video or not, I bet you've had at least one cavity in your lifetime as an adult,
adolescent,
teenager, child,
or an infant. I'm partially saying this because, well, I've had over 6 cavities in my lifetime, and all of them were when I was just 7 years old. So I guess I'm kind of asking to make myself feel better, but moving on. Your teeth that is currently in your mouth right now are made up of various layers. The predominant layers consist of the enamel, dentin, and the pulp. As you can see, the enamel is the most outer layer of the teeth, with the dentin coming in as the second most outer layer, and the pulp coming in as the third outer layer. Or I guess it's considered an inner layer at that point, but you get the point. Now, the enamel is made up of a substance that's really cool, and its name is hydroxyapatite, and it makes up 90% of the enamel, while also making up 45% of the dentin. Hydroxyapatite is extremely important not just because it makes up 90% of the enamel, but because it can be used synthetically to literally regenerate broken bones. What makes hydroxyapatite even more valuable is that hydroxyapatite is essential for natural use and not just synthetic use. An example of this would be the substances that make up the teeth, such as the enamel and dentin, as previously mentioned. Now, since enamel is literally made up of 90% hydroxyapatite, it's important to know the chemical formula of hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite is made up of calcium, phosphate, and hydroxide, which makes up its chemical formula. Within this chemical formula, let's write out the solubility equilibrium of hydroxyapatite within aqueous solutions, which would look something like this. Now, knowing equilibriums, we can come to an understanding that this equilibrium isn't actually a bad thing. It's a perfectly normal thing that happens. The KSP, or solubility product, within this equilibrium would look something like this, which, according to Cameo.com, is insoluble in water. Also, side note, when something is insoluble, it's still soluble but at a very minimum. Many people confuse insolubility with completely being insoluble, but it's still soluble. Just barely. You may be thinking, okay, that's cool, but where does the tooth decay come in?
well, this is where the tooth decay comes in.
To emphasize the prevalence of tooth decay, let's interpret this in a realistic solution. Let's say it's June 2020 and you're stuck in quarantine. Now, I don't know about anybody in this world, but quarantine made me feel incredibly sluggish. And I assume a lot of people felt sluggish as well. But let's say that this sluggish behavior caused you to stay home and binge watch,
My Hero Academia? I don't watch anime.
well, we all know what happens when you're binge watching any show, which is the consumption of an artificially carbonated beverage called soda, or any other drink with a pH lower than 7. Well, let's say that your desire to drink soda, drink with a pH lower than 7, becomes a reality and you drink it. Well, here's where the tooth decay process starts. When you drink any drink that has a pH lower than 7, the pH environment of your mouth decreases to a certain extent. This pH decrease is due to hydrogen ions being clustered in your mouth from the acidic drink. Now, what happens after this is all due to Le Chatelier's principle, which states that if
The dynamic equilibrium is disturbed by changing the conditions, the position of equilibrium shifts to counteract the change to establish the equilibrium.
Now, in this case, the change in condition is a change of pH level within the mouth caused from the consumption of acidic drinks. If we refer back to what happened when pH of the environment goes down, we can safely infer that hydrogen ions are being added. These hydrogen ions come in contact with anions, which in this case are the phosphates and hydroxides. A visual representation would look something like this. And yes, I am aware that the ratio between calcium, phosphate, and hydroxide are not accurate at all.
For the sake of interpretation, bear with me, please!
Anyways, essentially what happens is that the hydrogen ions bond with the hydroxide anions and the phosphate anions. Now, this causes calcium to basically panic. And no, calcium doesn't literally panic, but it basically results the calcium ions to not have the needed ratio between phosphate and hydroxide. Now, this results in the solid substance of hydroxyapatite to dissolve more of its material to fix the dynamic equilibrium or fix the ratio in this case. And if we refer back to Le Chatelier's principle, this would be the part where it says,
Changing the conditions, the position of equilibrium shifts to counteract the change to establish the equilibrium.
And this whole wearing off motion presented from hydroxyapatite, or in other words, hydroxyapatite's sacrificial actions, is the process of tooth decay.